You are living in the most dangerous time in American history.
We won't take a single back step.
Former professional basketball player is now the Republican Party's choice.
Can you imagine Royce White, the U.S. Senate?
White won the endorsement on May 18th with 67% of the vote.
There's nothing that guarantees we win, but I guarantee you if we lose, we will die. Rejoice, praise be to God. It is a stunning victory for some, not for us here in the movement, this audience. Hopefully we're getting new people into the audience. Hopefully Donald Trump winning will trigger what you saw from AOC, where she's asking her followers, which Trump podcast do I need to go watch? I mean, and I'm saying it honestly, genuinely, which Trump podcast, because and Bannon was one of the first to say it, and we're going to have to sort this out in the near future, and we're going to have multiple fights on multiple fronts, but the socialist populist movement will ultimately drift towards MAGA from that end of the spectrum. This is your left, this is your left, this is your right. But on the farthest end of the left, those populists, those socialist populists over there do need ministering. They do need to be ministered to. They need to be outreached to. The Bernie Sanders crowd. The stark difference between the nationalist populist and socialist populist movement is obviously on the nationalist populist side. We believe in borders. We believe in having a country. We believe in the value of citizenship. We believe in our Christian values that are the bedrock of how this country started and what made this country great, in our opinion. On their side, they tilt more toward a secular or atheist worldview. And is there a real coalition between us and them in the future? Who could tell? I mean, many of us would have never imagined that Kamala Harris and the rest of the Democrats would embrace Dick Cheney with open arms right in front of everybody. I mean, it didn't really surprise us because we in this movement, we all understood that uniparty corruption was happening behind the scenes, but to see it happen right out in the open was somewhat surprising, and it was very detrimental to the Democrat Party in the end, in my opinion. But we're going to talk about that and a lot more. I just want to start giving people a preview of what the episode is going to be about in the first, 2 minutes, because I guess we have short attention spans. I don't know. It's what I'm told. Donald J. Trump is the 47th president of the United States of America. Rejoice, praise be to God. I'm happy. I want to say congratulations to Donald Trump, his family, his campaign, his team. I want to say congratulations to you out there in the audience, the MAGA movement, the America Firsters, all the American patriots all across the country, all the people, the content creators, the journalists, the show hosts, obviously War Room, the War Room posse. You're the tip of the spear. The great Steve Bannon, who is home now, and he is on a tear. I can't get enough of watching Steve right now. He's on fire, as he should be. Everybody else there at the War Room that makes the show go, makes the show happen. Grace Chong, Maureen Bannon, Cameron, young Cameron. He helped hold the thing together when Steve was gone, and he's a young man. I don't know if many of you know Cameron, but he's a young man, and he did a great job of holding the thing together while Steve was gone. So congratulations to everybody. Congratulations to everybody who contributes to the War Room show. Again, we've been the tip of the spear for a while now, and it's starting to bear fruit. Shout out to Alex Jones. I know tomorrow on Wednesday, InfoWars is set to close down and be auctioned off, and it's a very troubling thing to see the lawfare still come down to bear on Alex Jones despite our victory. But I'm sure the great Donald Trump will reward Alex Jones in some capacity for his loyalty and his hard work for this country. Maybe we end up buying InfoWars back and putting it back in the hands of Alex Jones. Maybe it's time for Alex to move on to something else. That's all for Alex Jones to decide. He's been a great friend of mine. Obviously, he supported me, and I love being on the InfoWars platform. And I can't tell you how many people come up to me all across the country and say, I first heard you on Alex Jones hosting the fourth hour, and I love when you host the fourth hour, and I love that you and Alex Jones are so close, and that you support each other the way you do. It's a great thing for the movement and for the country, and that is more the coalition we need to build. So, uh, I'm watching anxiously to see what ends up happening tomorrow with InfoWars and going forward. But Alex Jones will be just fine. I guarantee you that. Um, as far as my race goes with Amy Klobuchar, we want to say thank you to everybody who voted in Minnesota. Obviously, 1.3 million voters is a hell of a lot, and we got almost 400,000 more votes than the last person who went against Amy Klobuchar, and we gained about 8 points. We're going to talk about the math and the statistics in a minute because I think we have a little bit of a gap there as a culture in America. But thank you to everybody who helped with the campaign. Thank you to everybody who door knocked, everybody who dropped literature, everybody who made phone calls, everybody who just spread the word. If you were living outstate and you had family that lives here in Minnesota, which there are a lot of you out there in the audience, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. We are not stopping. We are not stopping, and we are going to march forward with no break. That there's going to be no layoff. There's going to be no lag time. We are going right now. And I'm going to talk about that in a moment as well. But the first things first, let's talk about Donald Trump and this victory. And I say this again with the most genuine intention. Donald Trump was victorious. Donald Trump won the Electoral College in decisive fashion. Donald Trump is a once-in-a-lifetime political figure. The man had to be shot. He had to survive 3 assassination attempts and have the mainstream media basically spoil all of their credibility in order to keep him out of the office, out of the Oval. And a lot of that contributed to why he won. Not to mention the fact that his platform, his message is exactly what America needs right now, and we do need to get back to some America First policy. And Donald Trump at bottom, fundamentally, ideologically, as a political figure, spoke to something that resonates deep with the American people, or let's say enough of the American people for him to come out with the win. But I'll tell you this, and I'm going to tell you this as honest as I can, because we're beyond the victory now. The time for celebrating is over. And anybody who tells you anything different is doing you a disservice. I know Donald Trump's getting to work. I know the people he's putting in place for his administration are getting to work. And all of us out here in the grassroots, all of us out here across the country that support Donald Trump, we need to be getting back to work as well. In fact, we probably need to be working and thinking about working harder than he is, harder than his administration and his shock troops are. We got to be thinking about how does our culture in each individual part of the country, in each individual community, in each individual home, how do we get back to an America where we never let what happened or what almost happened happen again? We have to start to think about that right now today, and that's who I want to be. That's who I want to be for this movement. I want to be that coach, that basketball, that football, that wrestling, that boxing, that coach that keeps us focused, keeps us snapped right into place so we don't lose sight of the dangers on the horizon. We're going to start with this today. Understand, Donald Trump did not win with the numbers. He won the narrative. They intended to manufacture consent, the consent of the public, the will of the people, we the people, around a bunch of lies, and they got so desperate. They got so desperate to keep Donald Trump out of office, the lies stacked up to a point where it became a detriment rather than a help for them. And he ended up winning the narrative. Now, having God reach out and physically put his hand on Donald Trump and turn his head slightly as 3 bullets zoomed past his face didn't hurt either. And there is such a thing as divine intervention, and we got to get clear about that as well, and we'll talk about that later. But that helped us a lot, as it should have, as it very well should have. But, there were still people who fought against that, and the machine fought against that as hard as they possibly could. And in fact, we still aren't so sure that assassination attempt didn't come from within the machine. So there's a lot of layers to the assassination attempt itself, but it was certainly a turning point, a tipping point for this campaign. Donald Trump won the narrative. And we all across this country right now have to start to wrap our minds around winning the narrative going forward on a consistent basis. Sure, he won the votes along the margins in all the places that we needed to win, but it was still close. And that's not a knock on Donald Trump. And see, some people in this movement, some people on this side of the aisle, some people in this party, some people in this country are eventually going to try and make the case that Donald Trump only won by a narrow margin along the swing states or the battleground states because he was a flawed candidate. That's still coming. You got to understand. I mean, and again, we're going to get into all of that, but I'm sorry, I'm kind of dipping forward, but you understand that's still coming. The narrative is still going to be the fight. So he won along the margins, and that's not a dig on Donald Trump. It's actually a knock on the rest of the country that it was even close. It shouldn't have been close. Now, that being said, they let him win. And I know that's going to seem controversial to some. I know it's going to seem controversial. When I say they let him win, do I mean that Donald Trump didn't earn the victory? Do I mean that Donald Trump wasn't the best candidate? Do I mean that Donald Trump isn't the exact leader we need at this moment in American history? That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is it's obvious that they held back on the cheating because everybody was watching. It's obvious that about 8 to 10 million votes conservatively are missing from this total. And anybody who believes that those 8 to 10 million votes are missing just because Kamala Harris was such a bad candidate, you're fooling yourself. You're fooling yourself and you're playing right into their psychological trap. Remember, these people have intergenerational wealth. They have intergenerational time on their hands. They're playing the game in 12 dimensions. And if we think about it even from a more metaphysical and spiritual standpoint, Satan is way out in front of us. There's no doubt about that. His schemes, his wickedness, his ability to manipulate and sort of weave his way into the back door of whatever outcome takes place it's metaphysical. I mean, he has that kind of intellect, and that's it's not anti-Christian to acknowledge just how powerful Satan is. Will he lose in the end? Obviously, but never underestimate him. And we should never underestimate our enemies. And for that reason, I'm telling you now, at the highest level of this game, they had to let him win. They had to let Donald Trump win. Everybody was watching. They knew everybody was watching. We out there in the movement, we in some in this audience, we around the country, it's hard for any one individual to really gauge just how much everyone else knows or what their feelings are pertaining to a given narrative. It's hard for us to know as individuals because we're becoming more and more disconnected every day. Every day, just in general, human beings are becoming more and more separated, isolated from one another. And the only way we really get a feel for what everybody else is thinking is now based on social media. And some of that was good and to our benefit. Elon Musk certainly played a huge role in the election on that front, and many other content creators and social media influencers on the America First side, which we do have to continue to expand that that piece of our movement, because social media and technology is not going away. Trust me, and they're going to reboot, they're going to reorganize, but it's hard for us to really get a sense of where everybody else is. I mean, even social media can be somewhat fictitious, right? And so even though it seemed like we had the momentum on our side, it seemed like we were, it did enough to get the victory. They knew exactly how much momentum we had. Oh, yeah, our opponents, our enemies, the ones who hold the power of the institutions and can see all the data on the backside, they knew how many people were watching this election, how many people were interested in this election, how many people were becoming more favorable for Donald Trump, or at least you could say wavering, on the fence if they had formerly been Democrats or on the left or independent, or maybe they weren't watching at all. They can see all of it. And that's the great danger of this sort of technocratic fourth industrial revolution internet monster that we've created, the eye in the sky, right? They have way more information about us individually and the full picture than any of us could possibly imagine. So they knew that everybody was watching. They knew it would be a bad time to cheat, because the last thing they wanted to do, first of all, the last thing they wanted to do was lose all of their remaining credibility. The second thing they wanted to do, the next thing they didn't want to do was, if Donald Trump if Donald Trump couldn't be stopped, the last thing they wanted to do is be caught cheating in the process. And there were places, watch Arizona, watch some other places around the country, even look at my race, and we'll talk about that in a moment, but there were places where there was probably still some cheating, but overall at the highest level, that after midnight that we saw in 2020, that didn't take place. And again, it was because Donald Trump won the narrative. And despite how all of us were on the edge of our seats, kind of with this angst and this uncertainty about what everybody else in the country was thinking. We know what we're thinking. We see the echo chamber. We know the circles and the content that we're watching. We know what's being said there, but do we really know what everybody else? No, we can't know. The country's too big. You're talking about 350 million people. So everybody's on the edge of their seat on election night. That's part of the commercial value, the sort of sporting of election season. We could talk all we want to, but at the end of the day, it's about the people, and it's about the elections and the integrity and the way that it's counted and so on and so forth. So we get a very, very small picture of the overall spirit of the time. These technocratic overlords that we've created, that we've allowed in our society, they get a much bigger picture. They knew it'd be a bad time to cheat, so they held off on the cheating and they let him win. Why did they let him win? Well, why didn't they say, you know what, we can't allow him to win. We have to go for broke right now. We can't allow him to win. That's what I really want to talk to you about today, and I hope you're still with me. Let me get some water here. My apologies. That's what we're here to talk about today. Why did they let him win? Why now? They seem more desperate than ever. They seem more ideologically driven than ever before. Why would they let Donald Trump take back the reins of power at the very moment where it would appear they were the most desperate to push their agenda forward? Why hold off on the cheating? Why not just go for broke? That's what we're going to talk about. I have a theory. The theory is they're going to try and wait Donald Trump out. They have enough belief in the swamp. They have enough belief in the people that they could let's say they could sneak right up next to Donald Trump over the course of this next 4 years, that they'll be able to slow him down enough to keep some resemblance of that world order intact. And in 2028, they're going to run their play. And if I was them, that's what I would do, honestly. And sometimes you have to take that chessboard and you have to swing it the opposite direction and think to yourself, if I was them, what would I do? And it's hard to do that sometimes because, there is an element of, when you have some sacred honor or some national honor, you have some Christian ethic, it is somewhat difficult to put yourself in the shoes of your opponent as they start to become more and more depraved. But if I was to just swing that chessboard and do my best to think, what would I do if I were them? I would let them win. I would have to. I would let them win. I would try to quell. I would try and quell all of the questions about election integrity. Even though Donald Trump says we're going to go to paper ballots and he's going to do his best to try and clean these elections up, I would try and quell the immediate skepticism of the elections. Bring that down, okay? And you're seeing that a lot right now. You're seeing the far left of, the 60-some million that are, suffering from the Trump derangement syndrome. You're seeing them go, he cheated. I mean, Elon Musk used Starlink, the Russians, whoever else. I mean, they couldn't even help themselves. I mean, that's how much manic energy they've built up on that side of the political spectrum. They couldn't even help. They don't even see the contradiction. They don't even see the hypocrisy of telling us we're all election deniers and conspiracy theorists. And then the day that they lose, Donald Trump cheated. I mean, it'd be comical if it wasn't horrifying. But, on that, but in the middle now, with your pundits, with your low-level grundoons, they're all shilling. They're saying, no, we can't deny these elections. The Krassentines and all these other people like that who are paid influencers from the DNC, even a lot of the politicians, they know that it's more advantageous for them to concede this election, allow Donald Trump to do his worst in their eyes, not ours, not mine, do his worst and try and play the long game. Why? Because Donald Trump is a unicorn. Donald Trump is a political, cultural, spiritual anomaly. And the best thing they can hope for, the best thing they can try and do now is ride this wave out, which is why all of us have to raise our sort of baseline intellectual, philosophical, spiritual, cultural bedrock. We have to try and raise that bedrock up to a different level to match or at least support the anomaly that Donald Trump has become. We have to do that now because remember, on their side, the depravity, their baseline depravity is somewhere where they can call upon many. I mean, they can call upon many. I'm not so sure that our bench is that deep. I'm not so sure that our bench on our side is that deep. Now, do we have God with us? Do we have some other favor? Do we have some other things going for us like the truth? Absolutely. But see, now we got to thread a needle. There's a needle we're going to have to thread here, and that needle is, and this is what I'm going to talk about, but that needle is the rise of technology and the increase of convenience always drifts back towards depravity. Right? The increase of convenience, the increase of the advancement of technology isn't going to tilt towards righteousness. That's probably what you could say the real, the real intuition, the real spiritual intuition of what we call the conservative movement would rightfully be anchored on is as human beings, especially as we see now today, but in retrospect, the whole trajectory of human civilization, as human beings, we have a natural affinity for technological and industrial advancement. And with it comes a great deal of information, a great deal of convenience, a great deal of let's say, new kinds of freedom. But it usually lacks wisdom. And what the conservative movement needs to become now is the sort of backbone, the intellectual, spiritual, philosophical backbone of the wisdom that accompanies the information that we're able to acquire. As an aside. Anyway, back to my point. Donald Trump is an anomaly. And if I was them, I would wait him out. Said, no, we're going to throw some rhinos in there. We're going to throw some neocons in there. We got a House and a Senate that before the Democrats had all three branches too, and they had some infighting, and that's why a lot of things weren't able to get done because they had to balance between the agenda that they wanted to push, or some wanted to push through Joe Biden's administration, and what's going on out there in the streets, and how are we going to get reelected, and the AOCs and the Ilhan Omars and some of the other more extreme individuals in their party stymie things up. Now, on our side, they're going to say that the MAGA movement, the diehard MAGA movement, is the more extreme, wing of the party that's trying to stymie things up. And they're going to make Donald Trump the poster child of that problem. They're going to say, things aren't really going the way that they should, having all three branches of government. And it's those far right-wing extremists like Matt Gaetz and the Freedom Caucus that are the problem. That's coming. I mean, you just take it to the bank. You kind of just feel it. Even now with the Senate Majority Leader, vote coming, you're already seeing it. McConnell had the. If I was McConnell, I would go hide in a, pardon my language, in a fucking hole somewhere. If I was McConnell, as soon as I saw Donald Trump win, I would go hide in a fucking hole. He doesn't have the sacred honor to even do that. He's going to put Thune up. He's going to put Cornyn up. I mean, these people are, they believe in their own institutional entrenchment so much. They don't even have the sacred honor to bow out when it's obvious they should. They double down when they should fold. But we'll see who actually is right in that regard. And that's why I'm talking about this. Again, if I'm them at that high level, those uniparty apparatchiks and this globalist technological movement, I can wait 4 years for Donald Trump to move on through. I can wait for Donald Trump to move on through. Will he be able to do a lot of damage? Probably. But will they be able to, in the Supreme Court? I mean, let's be clear. That 4-5 vote in the Supreme Court about letting illegal aliens vote in this election that just passed, that tells you a lot about the Supreme Court. Let's not be thinking a lot of these legislative fights and these executive power fights that are going to happen now when Donald Trump tries to take an axe to this machine isn't going to end up there in the Supreme Court, and that the Supreme Court's always going to come back favorable. They've painted the Supreme Court as though it's dangerous. They've painted the Supreme Court as though it tilts really conservative or even extreme, but we don't know that to be the case. In fact, by our standards, everything that we see is to the contrary. And we look at the decision with Steve Bannon. That's a great example where the Supreme Court had everything they needed. Everything they needed to rule against the lawfare that had broken out. Unless there's something that we're not seeing in the general public. And hey, I'm just a regular guy. Came from a blue-collar neighborhood. I was raised by a single mother. I played sports. I read a few more books than many of my counterparts, and I'm here to have an opinion. I'm just a guy, though, okay? There's an entire layer of American politics and government and corporations and multinational corporations that I have no clue about. I can only guess what's actually happening. But when I look at the facts that were out on the table, the Supreme Court had everything they needed to rule in favor of Steve Bannon in that situation, and they didn't. So I'm not super confident that the Supreme Court is going to rule in favor of Donald Trump as he starts to take an axe to this Leviathan. So again, I'm trying to wait him out. And I'm thinking to myself, in 28, who's going to take the reins? Who's going to go up against, who's going to go up against Gavin Newsom? Who's going to go up against AOC? Who's going to go up against Michelle Obama? And those are just the sort of celebrity picks. The bench that they have is so deep, it's actually keeping me up at night. Because I'll tell you now, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is coming. Call it a hot take, say that I'm a conspiracy theorist or whatever you want. I'm telling you now, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is coming. And when I say him, I don't even mean him specifically, although I do think he's a sleeper candidate that's up there for them to run in future elections because his likability in the public is so high. I mean, they've run The Rock through so many, and rightfully so. He's a good actor. And if you grew up in the 90s in the Attitude Era of the WWE, The Rock was everything. I mean, he was an anomaly in and of itself. I mean, culturally, The Rock is like a Donald Trump in some ways. I mean, he literally shifted culture through professional wrestling, and he went on to parlay it into an incredible, Hollywood career. And he's been in so many movies. He's the highest paid actor in Hollywood for a reason, and he does a great job on camera. I'm not knocking him, but what I'm saying is he is coming. And I don't even mean him specifically. I more so mean there's a deep bench of people on that side of the aisle that they can now call on, and they can go in ahead of time and start to mold and manufacture their message and platform to seem more America first. Okay, they're going to try and play on the heartstrings of where they think they lost that populist vote, and they're going to try and reconstitute it around a new candidate who can credibly sell you that they really believe in this stuff. And sure, there'll be the few clips that you could pick from here and there to say, wait a minute, he's contradicting himself there. But it'll be few and far between. They'll make sure they'll pick somebody who didn't get too far out over their skis, way over in the progressive left of the spectrum, and that'll be the person that they run. And I'm telling you now, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is coming, but I'm waiting him out. I'm saying, who are they going to give the mantle to next? Who's going to be, and look, I like it. Look, I voted for Tulsi Gabbard. I wrote her name in. Not this time, back in 2020. Love RFK Jr. Known him for years now. Big fan of his. I endorsed him as the independent candidate, not over Donald Trump, but I endorsed him, to be the independent candidate, for president. I would have loved to see an RFK Trump ticket just to throw it in the deep state's face, just so they had to, watch Kennedy's name be on that ticket. And I think Vance is a superstar. Young like myself, 38 years old, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. 38 years old, a rising star in the movement. Sharp as it gets, articulate, knows how to articulate the positions really well. I like J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance is a hitter. Vivek Ramaswamy, another hitter, articulate, sharp, good on his feet, another hitter. And there's a lot of other people in there as well. Carrie Lake, obviously they marshaled up all their resources to keep Carrie Lake out of the Senate for a reason, partly because she's a star and they want to try and cap her celebrity as much as they can now before she really has that breakout that I know is coming for her in the future. So we got a lot of people on our side as well. The question is, can they be as galvanizing as Donald Trump? There's a perfect storm here that happened. We had the right ideas. We told the truth. Donald Trump had the balls to not waver when he was attacked relentlessly. And I can't say that for everybody else. And I'm not saying that other people don't have courage. What I'm saying is I've never actually seen Donald Trump even get angry. I've never actually seen him show anger. I mean, in the last few weeks of the election, I had to kind of reflect on Donald Trump myself, and I was thinking, man, are they actually gonna let him win? Remember, I was saying in the podcast 2 weeks, 3 weeks out, if I'm them, I'm letting them win. But even at when you start to think, are they really gonna let him win? And I started to think to myself, what signs of leadership does Donald Trump show that I don't feel I have in myself yet, that I need to still work on? And it dawned on me, I'm a fire spitter. I'm a smash mouth, in your face, brash. I don't give a fuck. I'm going to say it the way I want to. I'm not going to apologize. If the people don't like it, they'll come around when they've had enough of being fucked over. That's just who I am. And maybe in the future, we'll need some of that. And maybe by the time I get to the place where I'm really involved in the thing across the country, maybe I'll be a little more mature. Maybe that's exactly what we're going to need. I don't know. Time will tell. But I started to think, I've never actually seen Donald Trump get angry. Not that I don't know he was probably angry from whatever situation we may have seen him in the public, but I've never actually seen him show anger, which is crazy in contrast to how they paint him out to be this vile, extreme, violent, just ugly person. I started thinking to myself, when have I ever actually seen Donald Trump go off? I mean, like really lose it, really gap out and just go off. Never. I mean, he has incredible self-control, and I only bring that up to point out Donald Trump is a political unicorn. Not only did he have the balls to stand in the fire as they attacked him relentlessly, he did it with grace. He did it with much more grace than I would have done. I mean, and And I probably would say the same for many other people who would have been in his position, because they did try and lie relentlessly to the point where, they say if you say a lie enough, it just becomes true, especially when there's nothing there to, to push back. And that a lot of that is true, which is why still 72 million people voted for Kamala Harris. So the numbers say. But Donald Trump is a unicorn. I mean, we really have to take a moment here as a movement, wrap our heads around the fact that Donald Trump is one of the most transformative people in the history of human civilization. I'll say that again. We have to wrap our minds around the fact that Donald Trump is one of the most transformative people in the history of human civilization. And I don't know who's next, honestly. So, again, I'm waiting them out. Let me tell you how it benefits them to wait him out. And this is much deeper. This is much deeper and broader sort of cultural analysis of where we are in this country and where civilization is headed all around the world. And I'm just calling the balls and strikes and the score as I see it. I was asked in this PBS Frontline interview, both sides seem to say it's an existential moment in our country, or really for the entire world. Because if Donald Trump wins, they say that he's a threat to democracy, and the MAGA movement believes that Kamala Harris is a Marxist communist, and if she wins, then communism will take over. I told them straight up, I think both groups are lying. Both groups are kidding themselves. They're bullshitting. Number one, communists have already taken over this country, and that's for us out there in the Donald Trump, MAGA, Republican Party, conservative movement. We have to understand that communism has already took this country over. Donald Trump has given us a foothold to start to climb our way back to some sanity and some stability. But make no mistake about it, communism has already taken over. Okay? So we have been hijacked by a communist ideology. And we were never a democracy. That's a lie. We were the post-World War II democratic liberal order. We defended the British Empire and their foreign policy, and we became a dying regime that many of our elites, many of our political, corporate, elites and corrupt, swamp, degenerates managed that decline, managed that dying regime. They managed it and they got rich on the way down. But we haven't been a democracy for a long time, and that's the truth of it. So both sides were lying. And my point in bringing that up is, again, Donald Trump is a unicorn. He's an anomaly. Why would they wait him out? Why would they let him get the reins of power back? They believe in the institutional power to slow walk him, to slow him down. They believe in it at an almost spiritual level. And I'm going to get to that in a moment here. We're only about 30 minutes in. I'm getting stuff a little bit quicker here. At almost spiritual level, they believe they can slow him down. There's another reason. Remember I said Donald Trump won the narrative, and he did. But you would be surprised how quickly people forget. And we saw how quickly people forgot that Donald Trump was touched by God. We saw how quickly the mainstream, that was the psyop. That was the pilot right there to see, okay, he survived an assassination attempt. How quickly can we get people to forget that they just witnessed a miracle? And you saw them give a sort of radio silence on the assassination. I mean, by the standard of how crazy of an event it really was. How often does a United States president, even have an assassination attempt, let alone survive one, with everybody watching on national TV and him come that close with 3 bullets to getting his head blown off? That never happens, okay? So, I mean, that should have been an endless well for the mainstream media to drive traffic, which by the metric and the model, that's really what they're supposed to care about in a sort of free enterprise way. But they've abnegated that. They've given that up for their own political, ideological ambitions. Something to note. It's not always about the money, especially when you can print money as much as you want. We'll talk about the Fed a little bit later too, hopefully. But the pilot, the psyop was, how quickly can we get people to forget they just witnessed a miracle? How soon can we get people? And it happened quick. No, I couldn't tell you how many people I saw stop posting a picture of a man who was just touched by God. The picture should have been framed and carried up to the mountaintop and praised, and people should have prayed that they had just witnessed divine intervention. Now, they can call me a Christian fascist or a Christo nationalist or a conspiracy theory, or I believe in a sky daddy. None of that bothers me. None of that makes me, embarrassed. You can't God shame me. You can't Christian shame me. We witnessed a miracle. The man had 3 bullets zip past his face. If he didn't turn his head, his brains would have been all over that stage that day. And an entire generation would have been scared back into to speaking the truth, the same way many boomers are afflicted with the aftermath of John F. Kennedy having his head blown off. The man was touched by God. Slowly but surely, people started to talk about other things. And that's how fast, that's how good they've become with turning over information, with keeping people's focus exactly where they want to keep it. And sometimes it's the thing, and then sometimes it's taking the thing away and letting the cycle turn over on itself. I mean, these people are masters at propaganda. They're masters at manufacturing consent. They're masters of media. They're masters of controlling the narrative. Note, Donald Trump won the narrative this time. A lot of things had to happen for him to win the narrative this time. RFK Jr. had to see the light. Tulsi Gabbard had to see the light. Elon Musk had to see the light. There were even rhinos and neocons who on the day Trump was on the day Trump was almost assassinated, I saw them change their tune. They did it for a dishonest reason, but nonetheless, they were forced to change their tune. So God actually intervened, and not only did he save Donald Trump's life and potentially save this country, he actually saved the narrative. That's how brilliant. I mean, that is the genius of divine wisdom. Not only did he save Donald Trump's life and potentially this country, he actually saved the narrative. He actually forced people to acknowledge that Donald Trump was destined for something. And it was just enough people saw the light to throw in with the movement, and we were able to rally a win on the margins everywhere we needed to. But they are masters of the narrative. And if I'm them, I'm saying we're going to make sure, because part of that nihilism, part of that atheist, Luciferian, satanic nihilism is to make things so chaotic that they force God to show himself, right? That's part of that nihilist thing. Is you see that played out sometimes by the villain. The villain in movies is that a good example is there's a movie Infinite with Mark Wahlberg and a couple other people, but the storyline was basically that people reincarnate, that these group of people reincarnate, and you had the good guys and the bad guys, the nihilists. They actually called them nihilists in the movie, which I thought was so fitting. But anyway, the kind of head bad guy in that movie, he had this obsession where he wanted God to show his face. He would torture himself. There was a scene in the movie where he waterboarded himself, and he was chanting these incarnations or whatever the case may be, and he was actually saying for God to show him his face. And I thought it was such a profound. I mean, some of these movie writers they're deep, man. I mean, okay, there's like, Oscar Wilde said, life imitates art. Some of these some of these writers are deep, and that nihilist worldview that almost wants to antagonize God to show himself so that they have some validation, some reassurance that he's real, that exists. And again, I don't mean to go off on a tangent, but I'm trying to sort of teach the process of critical thought at that deep level, while explaining how we got to where we are and where we're headed. But Donald Trump was touched by God. They're masters of the narrative. They think they can wait him out. Even more importantly, there's a strategy in here. At the highest level, there's a strategy. There's always a twofer. There's always okay, we have to let him win. What do we do now? It's obvious. And they've already begun. What they're going to do now is they're going to play the bottom position. And the bottom position bodes well for your cultural Marxist revolutionaries. See, one of the things that happened to them, one of the grandiosities in their own arrogance and sort of naivety about, proliferating the internet and thinking they could just, use influencers to flood the social media sites or social media platforms and swing everybody's consensus on any given issue. Where they went wrong with that is, they went gravely wrong with that is, it's hard to say you're the oppressed when you have all of the institutions of power. And they thought that the American people were stupid enough to believe that narrative while simultaneously watching all the institutions be in alignment with it. I mean, it's ridiculous for the NBA and the Washington Post and Amazon and Facebook and Apple and, pick a company, pick a multinational corporation that has huge presence here in the American market or in the mainstream media, who every time June comes around, they put the LGBTQ flag up on their social media icon. Pick one. They all played oppressed. They all played cultural Marxism. They all played the grievance and identity politics. It's very hard to do that when you dominate the actual economic markets, when you dominate the C-suites, when you dominate the lion's share of any given industry. It's very hard to play cultural revolutionary and Marxist. I'm the oppressed. We represent you, the oppressed, when I live in an ivory tower. And that was one of the things that Donald Trump went to work on back in 2016. And that bomb that went off on stage when he called out Hillary Clinton for the tax narrative that she tried to draw down on against him. And he said, well, wait a minute, you're donors. It just so happened a lot of those donors didn't support Donald Trump, but they did support Hillary. And they had been supporting a certain side of the political aisle for a long time. But it really started to bubble up here in the last 6 to 8 months, the last year and a half. People started to ask themselves, wait a minute, why is Don Lemon saying he's the oppressed one? And why is Oprah Winfrey talking about oppression? And why is Cardi B talking about oppression? Beyonce, Jay-Z, why are they talking about oppression? Lady Gaga, Robert De Niro. And you may like their art and you may like their work and you may like their music or whatever the case may be. I mean, Robert De Niro is a part of some of the greatest American film classics there are. However, got way off into some Trump derangement syndrome and started shilling for the Democrats hand over fist. But you can't play cultural revolutionary, you can't play cultural revolutionary Marxists when you're the most elite, rich people in the society. It doesn't work. It was breaking down. But now that the Republicans have all three branches of government, now that Donald Trump has won, now they get to quadruple down on the oppressed narrative. Trust me, I come from the belly of the beast. I know how these people think. Trust me. They like it this way. They tried to run it as far as they could, and they would have run with unencumbered. They would have crossed the finish line. Some of them are smart. Do never underestimate. Some of these people are brilliant. They are maniacally brilliant. They're not as stupid as they let some puppets go out there and present themselves as. Trust me. Trust me. They lost. They lost a decisive battle, but the war has just begun. Some of these people know what they're doing. And now, I'll save that for a moment. But again, it's easier to play cultural revolutionary from the bottom position. It's easy to play I'm oppressed when you're fighting off of your back. So we can't cheat Donald Trump with everybody watching. He's gonna win. We can see the metrics on the back end. We can see how many people are gravitating towards this counterculture narrative of Donald Trump being this, this lightning rod of anti-establishment political energy. And we can't cheat him in front of everybody. It would only discredit us. It would only discredit the institutions further. So we got to let him win. We're going to quell some of that energy, and we're going to play the long game of 4 years, and we're going to regroup, reorganize, refuel that cultural revolutionary Marxist oppressed narrative. And what better way to do it than when the Republicans have all three branches of government, and they can blame anything that takes place over these next 4 years on Donald Trump, and then they really get to say he's a fascist. This is what they're planning to do. Mark my words, take it to the bank. It's already begun. It's already begun. They're already going to work on it. We're still caught in the honeymoon phase. We're still caught in sort of celebrating that we finally got the steering wheel back. These people are going to throw themselves in the middle of the road. They're going to throw themselves in the middle of the road, and they're going to film it. They're going to say, we're oppressed. Now they're going to they're going to go back now, and they're going to recreate and manufacture what took place in the 60s. In the 60s, those people were actually on the right side of history, mind you. The civil rights movement, although it was co-opted, those people were on the right side of history. There was really some racism going on down there in the South, and they were really hosing and letting the dogs out on people who were overtly trying to be peaceful in their demonstrations. These people aren't going to play like that. They believe they have the momentum to push an anti-establishment, a corrosive, a nihilistic anti-establishment narrative. And when we have to use the rule of law and actually arrest these people, which we do have to do, they're going to say, look, we're oppressed. We're oppressed. Look, and why does that work? What is it in us what is it about our culture? What is it about the history of human civilization where people resonate with that oppressed narrative, which was the genius and brilliance of Karl Marx, is to stratify the society on two ends of the spectrum and say, well, the resources are always going to drift towards the top, and these people down here are always going to be in a somewhat super majority. And if we can get them to believe that the rich and the wealthy are the problem, we'll always have we'll always have something to fall back on. You understand that? Do you understand? The way that this thing has been laid out strategically, philosophically, which is why the number one mandate we have right now is to teach, not re-educate, not forcibly. We have to throw all our resources into teaching, into repairing the philosophical damage that's been done to our people and our culture, to the American mind. And that's going to mean taking out some of these intelligence community agencies and hacking them off. And that's going to mean going to the people and declassifying some documents and coming clean about a lot of what's going on in this country for a very long time. But we're going to have to do that. And if we don't do that, if we're not willing to do that, we are going to be reversed in 4 years. We are going to be reversed. Maybe it's not 4 years. Maybe it's 8. But at some point in time, the advantage that the Marxist and communist ideology has, they can play from the down position. The down position benefits them. The down position is an asset in many ways. It allows them to keep the mask on. The mask that they almost pulled all the way off. I mean, and for most people, for 75 million people, the mask came off for sure. It's like, wait a second. You guys are saying you're oppressed. You guys are saying that the institutions are tyrannical, but you're the ones being tyrannical. You're showing that you actually aren't so concerned with the people or all the people, let's say. You're not concerned with all the people. You're concerned with getting power. And when you have power, some people will become other just as quick as you claim when you were in the streets, when you were the grassroots, when you were just the activists without a pot to piss in. They showed, they didn't show everyone, but they showed enough people what their real intentions were for us to win the election. Understand, people's attention spans are short. People forget. People didn't even really have it all the way sorted out. People still don't have it all the way sorted out. They have an intuition. There was an intuition that was aided by a divine a touch of God. That gut intuition that show us a miracle in that positive sense, not that nihilist sense, but in that positive sense. Look, we feel that something's not right, and as human beings, we seek the truth and we seek freedom. Show us something. Show us a sign, God. That was what the spirit that was what the intuition was saying at the moment when Donald Trump survived that assassination. It was already bubbling up. Show us something, God. And God showed you. I mean, don't you ever forget it. It almost brings me to tears right here, right now. That God loves us so much. At the very moment we needed, he reached out and he touched Donald Trump and he turned his head and let him survive an assassination attempt that by all thinking should have ended Donald Trump's life that day. That's what God did for us. But that was a special, that was a very special set of circumstances that took place there. The default is that even us in this movement, even on our side, we still like the convenience more than we like the truth. Even today still, even with all we've seen, and it's no different throughout history. It's no different throughout history. Look at the story of David. Look at the story of David. God gave David the strength of faith and the courage to go and slay a giant. And some of it was skill, but some of it was that divine favor. And yet still David, over the course of his life, turned his back on God's wishes and God's grace and God's love and had to, the nation of Israel had to suffer from some of David's imperfections. And even in Scripture it says, David is a man after the Lord's own heart. You can take it to the bank. David, Moses, these are men after the Lord's own heart. And even Moses. Even Moses was one that had some imperfection and it cost. It cost him and it cost people. So, for us to think that because God reached out and touched Donald Trump that day, that the game is over, the game has just started. In fact, you could say now is where the game gets dangerous. Now is where the stakes have been elevated. Anytime throughout history, throughout human history, when God has intervened, he has set a mandate on the people to show some reciprocity, some gratitude, some faith, an elevation of faith. And I'm not sure we're ready to do that yet. When I see that this victory wasn't a popular vote landslide, that those 30 million Christians they said were likely not to vote, and then the end number shows that it's the same voter total that has been for the last 8 elections, 7 elections, 6 elections, around 130 to 150 million, 150 to 180 million people in the 2020 election. But when I see that, I start to think to myself, we still aren't ready yet. We still don't want to show that gratitude, and that's what we have to work on today going forward. I said in the beginning, I'm not doing this for anybody else. Sure, I want to represent you. I want to stand up for the country, but I'm doing this for my own salvation. When God puts his hand on a man and our Christian community still doesn't show up to the polls, we're spitting right in the face of God. We're spitting right on. We're just spitting right on his charity, on his grace. We're just spitting on it. And I rebuke that in the name of Jesus. God, what more do we have to be shown? Even in my own personal life, I know I'm saying I'm even my own personal life, I'm thinking of we have to elevate to another level here. We've been given a reprieve, we've been given another chance. But if we don't stop giving up convenience, if we don't stop trading convenience for the truth, we're going to lose this thing right around the corner. That's how the devil plays. The devil's going to give you the convenience. That's the story of the fruit. That's the story of the forbidden fruit and the forbidden tree in the garden. The convenience, it's right there. All you got to do is reach out and take it. We know God said, but all you got to do is reach out and grab it, and it's right there for you. What's the forbidden fruit in our society? Why can they wait him out? Why can they wait 4 years, play the down position? Because humanity as a whole, America as a whole, culturally, we are hurling towards technocracy. We are hurling towards a technological advancement and future that we have no guardrails on whatsoever. No guardrails whatsoever. Technological advancement so scary, so dangerous that even a Donald Trump and all of his unique political circumstances and individual personality and character, even he may not be able to overcome. Or even a person like him may not be able to overcome in the future. That's what we're hurling towards. That's why they can wait him out. Because they see the metrics. They're watching the trend of humanity as a whole. Republican, Democrat, politics, even nationalism and globalism. Still a sort of front. The real question underneath it all is convenience or the truth? Vice or sacred honor? And there's a balance between the two always. I mean, that's sort of the plight of the human condition. That's part of what God gave us to test us to be worthy of an eternity. That there's some of that's in there. And we're being tested now, and we're going to be tested again. But I'm just trying to articulate that the long game here is technological advancement is the convenience that we are hurling towards, and they can see it. They can measure it. They're watching it. They're tracking it. They're saying, okay, there's this sort of make America great again, America first, libertarian, nationalist, populist, a sort of return to some sense of self-governance in the individual and the value of individual citizenship and rights. That's something that America as a unique moment, a small unique moment throughout human civilization, where America as a culture, as an idea, as a set of values and principles and the brilliance that was constituted right here in this country, there's something about America that has driven people back into this sort of orbit of rights and self-governance. And there's something so profound and special and beautiful about that. I can't really put it into words. I just tried, but I'm sure I failed. But the idea of America pulled us back into this orbit of self-governance and freedom. But the arc of history, of human history, is that man will succumb to the convenience of technological and industrial advancement. And that's really what we're fighting against. That's really what we're up against right now. It's got nothing to do with politics. The politics are the arena where the thing gets negotiated. But this is really a danger of, will mankind continue to drift towards a technological advancement and sort of futurism where we have unlimited information with very little wisdom? And there's nothing wrong with technology, and there's nothing wrong with information. There's a problem when the wisdom does not match. And that's why they can wait them out, because all the technological advancement is still progressing along, just progressing along as usual. Oh yeah, robotics, automation, cloning, genetics, artificial intelligence. It's all progressing along as usual, right on time, right on time. And the greatest onus on Donald Trump, the greatest challenge of Donald Trump's next 4-year term is going to be how much he can slow, impede, and sort of transform the arc of our technological advancement as a society here in America and as a byproduct all around the world. That is the real mandate. And it may not be the mandate that people voted for consciously. It may not be the mandate that people can articulate and say, but that is what's underneath it. Because as you advance technologically, as you get more and more convenience, you have no choice but to give up your freedoms and your rights. You could say that what made our founding fathers so brilliant is that they rejected the modernity. Many of them, explorers and adventurers, and then eventually settlers, and they rejected the modernity. They rejected the convenience that was there for them in greater post-Enlightenment Europe, and even there in Britain and Spain and all of these societies that had come a long way from the Dark Ages, okay? They rejected that, though. They said, no, we're going to go to a new country, and if we have to start from scratch without all this technological advancement, then that's what we have to do. It's not what we want to do. It's what we have to do. There's a sort of spiritual calling for us to do this. Now we find ourselves in a sort of epistemological crisis now where we see that the fall and rise, the eventual and sometimes cataclysmic destruction of a civilization can come by way of nature, right? I mean, there are existential threats out there beyond. Let's say that. Full stop. We know that the planet has been hit by asteroids a number of times. We know that the planet goes through certain atmospheric changes, and that can have a huge, effect on human civilization. We know that plague is a possibility, right? All of these things are out there. So we understand these existential threats, and our anxiety is, now that we know about it, what do we actively do to combat that? And the answer has unanimously been technology. The answer has unanimously been technology. And some of that's true. And I'm not saying that God hasn't charted a course where we do advance in technology. What I'm saying is it better come with the most elevated priority of wisdom that human civilization has ever seen. Because if not, we'll just be in the same turmoil that we've been in thus far. And again, some people warp Christianity into this notion that, all the things that are wrong with society are supposed to be wrong with society. There is some push and pull to the baseline of the human condition. There's some push and pull. There's some natural tension that exists for human beings to sort of move us forward, to bring us into and have a sort of calling of who we're supposed to become. Absolutely. But we've let things get way out of control. I mean, this isn't reasonable. This isn't constructive. This isn't a constructive pull and pull. This is a profound lack of faith and a lack of wisdom push and pull. And we're trying to climb our way out, and God's trying to show us a way, and he saved a man, and Donald Trump's given us a foothold, but we still have a problem. And the problem is we still don't believe that neoconservatism, that being a neocon is the same as being a communist. And that's the problem. And I don't need notes. I don't need notes. That was about an hour straight. I don't need notes. It just, the truth just flows. But now we get down to the nitty gritty of it. The problem we're having still is too many, let's take my race, for example, here with Klobuchar. Now, a lot of things happen here, a lot of things to think about. One is, do we still believe the count? No, I don't believe the count. I don't believe the count there in Arizona. I don't believe the count anywhere where they don't have voter IDs. And I question even the count some places that they do. Because I know how great the impulse is to cheat when the stakes are this high. That's just human. And we cheat everywhere else in the world. We, the American government, our intelligence community, we've been involved in cheating and coups and unseating regimes everywhere else in the world. It's crazy to think that we wouldn't be involved in it right here at home. And we're going to get a good look at that now. If the great Kash Patel becomes director of the CIA and Waltz is going to be national security advisor, and there's going to be a lot of people put in place now that I think have a genuine desire to root out the corruption. So we're going to get a good look at some things now. But some of it's well hidden. I mean, some of it's beyond the view, right? I mean, it's going to take some real forensic. Understand, some of the Kash Patels of the world, they're not just going to roll in and have everything on a piece of paper and say, here are the corrupt people. We're going to have forensic teams go in and look at the chain of custody of inventory from the Department of Defense. We're going to have people go in and forensic audit where some of this money in these slush funds and these black bags went to some of these shell corporations. And there's going to be real investigations that are not going to happen quick. I mean, they may take years to uncover who the real forces and benefactors are of some of this corruption in the deep state. It's called the deep state for a reason. You don't just walk in and the deep state has a sign on it, like you're coming down the airport escalator, the baggage claims, oh, deep state right here. No, it's not going to work like that. It's going to be a process to find these people. And there's a clock that started. When Donald Trump won a week ago, the clock started. He's got 4 years to figure it out. They got 4 years to try and slow him down. They got 4 years to try and get the next person in line, whether that person be Republican or Democrat. And Eric Weinstein said it the best, what the two parties have been best at since the day that Kennedy was assassinated is they have used the primary process to prune populist candidates that had a sort of spiritual desire for the truth and freedom and to weed out corruption in our government. That has been what the primaries are used for. And so you take a race like mine. It's a perfect example. I mean, it just is perfect. And the political landscape here in Minnesota is a paragon of everything that's wrong with politics in our country. I'm going to explain it to you. Unique, very unique. Minnesota is touted as one of the most diverse places in America. If you're from Minnesota, if you're from the Twin Cities, you'll hear people talk about Minnesota is a great place to live, raise a family. It's so diverse. It's a lie. Minnesota is one of the most segregated places in America. Reason being is your rural area and your metropolitan area are so night and day, let's say. And in other states, other places across the country where you have, a few metropolitan areas scattered across the state, in the Twin Cities, you have a densely populated metropolitan area. The 15th largest, Minneapolis has 400,000 people. That's the population in the city of Minneapolis, which is the biggest city in the state of Minnesota, has 400,000 people in it. That's the total population. St. Paul, about 300,000 people. So these are not big cities. These aren't, Chicago, LA, Philadelphia, Houston, millions of people living in our major cities. We have the 15th largest metropolitan area in the entire country. Why? Because our suburbs go on forever. Our suburbs, I can't even really explain it to you. Our suburbs is just like it's just a bubble of suburbs. And so the reason I bring that up is that metropolitan lifestyle, that city, densely metropolitan worldview, which often becomes driven by the universities and academia and the people that are closest to the institutions of power, the corporations, Fortune 500s, and so on and so forth, that becomes entrenched in wherever that sort of metropolitan footprint touches. And then you got rural America. Rural America, yes, but rural Minnesota. And in rural Minnesota, they think differently, which is why I won, was it 67 something counties out of 87 counties, right? 2/3, almost 3/4 of the counties here in Minnesota. And we are unique also in that we have 87 counties in Minnesota, as to where Arizona has, far less. But there's a segregation of worldview here in Minnesota that's stark, okay? So you got that dynamic. Now you got a racial dynamic, and it's there. It's there. No, you got the white folks that live in rural Minnesota, and it is overwhelmingly white, and they have been painted as racists and extremists and fascists and Nazis and KKK and whatever else, and nothing could be further from the truth. In my candidacy, I learned that. That's what makes me so dangerous. That's what makes these black conservatives dangerous anywhere, because we can go to rural America under the auspice of the ideas, the American values and beliefs, and come back with the story that these people aren't the KKK Nazis you think they are. But these rural white Americans, they don't want to go into the city. And these black folks or these minorities or the working Hispanics and other minority groups in the metropolitan and densely populated cities, they don't want to go into the Republican Party. They don't want to go out into rural America with the Republican base. And the two never shall meet. There's sort of like an anti-magnetic force there keeping these two from colliding. And the force is the narrative. The force is the narrative. That's why they could not let me win this race. Let me show you the lengths they went to make sure that I didn't win. From the day that I got the GOP, the Minnesota GOP endorsement, the Star Tribune, communist newspaper, went to work right away to support my primary opponent. And this is what Eric Weinstein was talking about the establishment trying to prune the two parties of their populist candidates. As soon as I won the Minnesota GOP endorsement at our state convention, overwhelmingly 67%, my opponent, Joe Frazier, neocon, wanted to support Ukraine funding, was used to be in the Navy, and that's the guy they bring up every time as military to play on the heartstrings of our veterans and that sort of patriotic red, white, and blue mantra. But he was a neocon. Neocon to boot, wanted to give money to Ukraine. He didn't get up there and give any type of compelling speech. Actually, it was almost laughable, the speech that he gave at our convention. And then you had me, right? And I do this all day. I'm at an hour and 17 minutes with no notes, and I'm just getting started. I could go 4 hours before I would even think about, breaking stride. So a 10-minute speech is like nothing. Smoked him out of the room with the speech, won the endorsement, 67%. The next day, the very next week, the Star Tribune, communist, left-leaning, endorsed Waltz, endorsed, not Ilhan Omar, endorsed Amy Klobuchar, and endorsed Tina Smith, endorses all the Democrats, endorsed Kamala Harris, I'm sure. Star Tribune goes to work and says that my opponent is a better candidate than I am. I mean, as if they have any real interest in the Republican Party winning anyway, which is almost laughable. But who they endorse, who they say are the better candidates, tells you everything you need to know about those candidates. So they went to work right away. And soon after they went to work, here comes the Republican establishment. Here comes the stalwarts, the sort of mini celebrities, the local celebrities of the Minnesota Republican Party. You had former gubernatorial candidate Kendall Qualls, and you had Paul Gazelka, who was the Senate Majority Leader for the Republicans. You had Michelle Benson. You had Norm Coleman. You had Rudy Boschwitz. Tim Pawlenty. All these people come out and endorse my opponent, again, siding with the Star Tribune. I mean, for any Republican, and this just is in general, if you're a Republican and you find yourself in agreement with the Star Tribune, if you're a Republican and you find yourself in agreement with the New York Times, you are probably the very element we're trying to get out of the party. I digress. So that's what they went to work on. Now they had to go to work on me a little bit deeper. And there is where the real treachery lies. And here is where I'm going to say something that may lose me the race in 26, but we have to say it nonetheless, okay? Because again, we have to have that elevated righteousness. We have to thread a needle here to save this republic. We're way far down into communism and secular humanism and all these other sort of philosophical ideologies that have ruminated and taken a vice grip on our culture and our country. We have to elevate the understanding right here, right now, or I guarantee you we will lose in 2 years and 4 years. This is the part that's not comfortable. Here's where they had to attack me next. Okay, we know the Star Tribune is going to go to work. We know they want to endorse Tim Walz, Kamala Harris at the end of the day. Not a shock. So they're going to endorse my opponent. They don't want Amy Klobuchar to have to face me in the open field. They're going to stymie it up, force a primary, which they did. Now they're going to get the establishment Republicans to say, he's a little too extreme. He's a little too MAGA. Yeah, even though all of them have to go on the record and say that they support Donald Trump, which they only say half-heartedly, to be honest. Okay, they only say it passively, to sort of smooth over their public appearance. Behind the scenes, they're never Trumpers. They got to say they're endorsing Donald Trump, but they really don't want to. And Royce, he's a little too MAGA. Okay, he's a little too far to the right. But then, this next layer is where the real treachery is. Then they have to commission the Michelle Fishbox of the MCLs, okay, the Christian Organization for Life. We have to commission the Michelle Fishbox to not send out Royce's pro-life stance to the Christian community. Yeah, oh no, and her husband, and Michelle Fishbox's husband, is in charge of the MCCL or the MCL. I don't know exactly what the name is, but they're a Christian organization. And they have, deep reach into that rural Minnesota Christian conservative community. And we have to commission the Tom Emmers, who's in charge of the Trump campaign here in Minnesota, to make sure that he and the rest of the 4 Congress members won't endorse Royce. And they're going to say, we're focused on our own race. But they're going to let all the grundoons underneath them say Royce was a bad candidate. And what they really want to say is Donald Trump is a bad candidate, but they can't say that because Donald Trump was too popular and he had too much momentum. But Royce, a little less well known, him we can undercut. Him we can sort of recoalesce all of these DeSantis and Nikki Haley supporters in the Republican Party, and there are many. Okay, Don't be mistaken for one moment. Minnesota had a widespread contingent of Republican voters and Republican Party officers who wanted nothing more than to see Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis be the nominee. And they were even open about it. In fact, my opponent, Joe Frazier's campaign consultant, her name was Preya, who they just let write an op-ed this very morning in the Star Tribune. It's funny, I said online, when you're real MAGA, when you're actually MAGA, ultra MAGA, America first, die hard, will hold the line, the Star Tribune don't let you write op-eds. And what did our op-ed say? The Minnesota Republicans have to find better candidates if they want to win statewide races, which means we have to go back towards the center of corruption. The center of a corrupt status quo. And my point to you is, again, MAGA is too extreme. Royce is too extreme. Donald Trump is too extreme. We can't undercut Donald Trump because he's got too much momentum. It would pull the mask off of us. If we undercut Donald Trump publicly, we'll reveal ourselves to our own voters. So if we play the fence and we sort of pacify Donald Trump because of his momentum, we can save face with our own voters out in rural Minnesota, but that doesn't mean we have to support Royce. Now, it's not all on them. It's not all on Finstad and Stauber and Emmer and Michelle Fishbach. It's also on the people. And there is a cohort of people in this country and in Minnesota that thought to themselves, we'll vote for Donald Trump. We feel obligated to vote for Donald Trump because who else are we going to vote for? Haley's out, DeSantis is out. We can't really bring ourselves to vote for Kamala Harris and the Joe Biden regime, but that doesn't mean we have to vote for all these other America First or ultra MAGA, let's say, candidates. And you're seeing some of that there in Arizona. Not all of it. I would much venture to guess that the Arizona, well, how does a Ruben Gallego, a communist, how does a Ruben Gallego get more votes than Kamala Harris? How does an Amy Klobuchar get more votes than a Kamala Harris? Since when do people vote in the presidential election more than they do in the Senate election? Since when does a figure who is as polarizing, quote unquote, as Donald Trump when it comes to the ideas from the two sides of the political aisle, since when does a character like that not draw the votes down ticket with him, especially when the candidates are so aligned with his message? I'll tell you how. Because those people out in those parts of the state, they never heard who I was. And I'm sure in Arizona, very similar, different with Carrie Lake because she's much more popular than I am. But a lot of them are not jacked into the social media and the news and the internet the way that we would think they are. A lot of them aren't as up on the sort of split in the Republican Party that's happened, that will continue to happen in the war that's broken out. And I may be controversial for saying this, but we just got to throw it all on out there. And I'm not worried about it for 26C because I'm going to go to each county and I'm going to minister the gospel and preach the truth in each county now, which is why I'm starting now. Not 2 hours. Sorry, I'm going on 2 hours, hour 30, but 2 years early. We're not waiting. We're not waiting for 18 months out. Oh, this is the time where candidates usually declare. And we're not waiting. We know what needs to happen. The politics need to stop being like sports, and we need to go out and canvass this state, and we need to go out and get in front of the people, get more people to register, get more Christians to register, get more people in the cities to register. And we need to get a real accounting of what's going on here in this state, or this state will never flip red. And part of what's happened here, is there is great benefit. There's great payment to be had in playing the losing side, being the Washington Generals. There's great benefit to being the Washington Generals. I'll give you an example. I'll give you a prime example. Prime example is Minnesota's a huge ag state. And the Minnesota Farmers Bureau usually, in most cases, endorses the Republican candidates. Why? Because the Republican candidates are usually the ones that are in the congressional districts that have more rural, agricultural interests. So the people that come from those districts usually have to have a message that addresses that constituency's concerns. And it's the Farm Bill. And the Minnesota Farmers Bureau endorsed Amy Klobuchar. They also endorsed Angie Craig. Now, in what world, and what I'm saying is, en masse, even your people that live in rural Minnesota know that the Republican Party's platform is so contrast from the Democrat Party's platform that they're going to vote Republican no matter what. And people can say that that's not smart or whatever, but there is some intelligent intuition in that, because it is true that, at least on face value, the Republican side produces candidates like Donald Trump and myself who are willing to speak the truth against, despite their own selfish interest or personal interest or economic interest or whatever the case may be. The Republican side is producing those type of candidates. It's producing those type of people. The Democrat side has a sort of unilateral and vertical integration, and when you get out to the far left, there's nothing but controlled opposition, and they're all Marxists. So those Republicans, those 1.3 million Republicans who vote Republican down ticket, there's some intuitional intelligence there, some real intelligent intuition in that. But if you go to those outstate counties, you'll see that Klobuchar was pulling in way more votes than Kamala Harris, a bigger percentage. Now, some of that could be Amy Klobuchar is well known. She's one of the most well-known popular politicians in Minnesota, and that says something about Minnesota in and of itself. But some of it is, that farmers, agricultural, farm bill. And in what world do American farmers think that the Amy Klobuchars of the world are not in lockstep with the Joe Bidens and Kamala Harris's, is that selling your ass to China, selling our ass to China and to BlackRock and to Bill Gates and all these other multinational corporations that are squeezing the farms out piece by piece. In what world do they think casting a vote for Amy Klobuchar is going to protect them? So you see, just like you think the black folks down in the city have drunk the Kool-Aid, there's some people out there in rural Minnesota who have drunk the Kool-Aid as well. You can go all throughout the counties and you'll see, and they'll fence it however they want to. They'll say, oh, Royce White was a bad candidate. Oh, we're not going to vote for somebody who uses the word cuck or fuck on his podcast. But you go out to rural Minnesota, these are regular working class, everyday people. These people use the word fuck and they're regular people. They're regular people with regular lives. Oh, Royce, this or Royce that, or, Royce is anti-Semitic. That was probably a popular one with the Christian community. Strange, my daughter has a Hebrew name, an Israelite name, but hey, what does that matter? Still, he's an anti-Semite. Okay. And they probably used that to ensure that Donald Trump wouldn't endorse me or, whatever the case may be. But none of that even matters. The point of the matter is this. We can get caught up in WWE. We can get caught up in WWE politics, or we can have the courage to see things and issues for exactly what they are and organize accordingly. In what world does Amy Klobuchar serve the interests of the farmers because she helped sponsor certain elements of the farm bill? And when you go look it up, I mean, I just in this last couple of days since John Thune's name came up, I go to look up the Farm Bureau, the Farm Bureau and the Farmers Bill, and I go to get more familiar with the people that were involved in it because that's what I do. I'm thorough. And what do I find in some of the first things I come across? That Amy Klobuchar sponsored certain Farm Bill legislation with none other than John Thune. These are who these people are. And it's so ironic. It's so ironic when you really start to dig in and uncover it. You realize we have so far to go. I mean, we have so much work to do to inform and educate the American people on exactly what's happening in this country's politics. There is still a veil that Donald Trump made a loud enough noise and big enough splash to break people's trance, to break people's hypnosis from. But that veil is still there. John Thune, John Cornyn. I almost called him John McConnell because, that's what it is. But these people are not friendlies. They're not friends of Donald Trump. They're not Trumpers. They're not Trump supporters. They're not MAGA. And that matters. Yeah, and why should we be ashamed? Why should we be ashamed of the title MAGA? Donald Trump, for all of his flaws and imperfections that they'll claim, Donald Trump was the first candidate that even started to break, to rock the boat of uniparty globalist politics and the managed decline of the West here in this country. He's the first one that even started to get close to it. And he's got a ways to go. He's got a lot of work cut out ahead of him, and so do the rest of us. But we have to be clear about what's really going on. And over the course of the podcast now, I might go to once a night. I don't know yet. We're talking about going to once a night. We're adding all kinds of stuff to the podcast. The show is being improved for Real America's Voice on Saturday mornings. And I may go to a daily show on Real America's Voice as well. But this is starting right now. This is the most dangerous part. Now is where it gets dangerous, when Donald Trump is gonna pull out that axe and he's gonna start to hack away pieces of this administrative state and the deep state, this unholy leviathan and bureaucracy, this is where the shit's going to get real, real dangerous. And we're going to be there with them every step of the way. But we're not going to be shy. We're not going to hold any punches. We're going to keep calling out exactly what we see. And here in Minnesota, we have a problem. We have a problem of leadership. And I don't care who comes down from where to co-sign who. Doesn't matter. I know what's going on here. I know what I see with my own eyes. When the Star Tribune asked Emmer and Stauber and Finstad and Fischbach if they'd endorse me or if they'd support me, and they all said they were focused on their own race, what they were really saying is, we don't mind Amy Klobuchar. And it's funny to go find the Farmers Bureau's endorsements, and there you see those four with Angie Craig and Amy Klobuchar as well. Uniparty, even when it comes to rural interests, even when it comes to the farmers' interests. Not all the farmers, but they have a constituency, and they will wrestle it from us. They're not going to give it to us. Now, some of their constituents, they're probably tricking and misleading and brainwashing and muscling and bullying and getting to a lot of there's a lot going on within each constituency. Just like when I go to the black community and I talk to people and they say, no, we don't support Kamala Harris. But yet, all of the exit polls from the election last Tuesday would suggest that even black men are still voting for Kamala Harris at 80%. If that's the case, and you Negroes out there are voting for Kamala, if you were willing to give our country to Kamala Harris and Cardi B, you should be ashamed of your damn self. You should be ashamed of yourself. See, and that's the thing about me. It may be that I am destined to a career, if you want to call it that, because it's not my career. My career is speaking the truth. My career is podcast and television, professional basketball, mixed martial arts. My career is writing. My career is being a coach, being a father, being an older brother, being a son. My career is being a man, an American citizen. That's my career. My career is the life that I have to live every single day. Being a politician is something that I would like to be able to represent people doing, but it's not my career. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt me one bit. I'm disappointed that the people of Minnesota, if we believe the numbers, think that Amy Klobuchar is good for them. Of course, I'm disappointed, but that means we got to do more educating and more ministering. But the point I'm making is we have to elevate our standard. When I go to the black community and I see numbers that would suggest people are still voting 80% Democrat, I think to myself, what more do they have to show you? What more do you have to see? Okay, things take time. And just like we saw Donald Trump make huge headway in the black community and with the Hispanic and Latino community, it will continue to happen because it's based on the truth. The only thing that will stop it is if we now take power and we see a cop shoot an unarmed black man and all of these Republicans come to let's say, make an excuse for it, and there will be the racial tension and the racial fuel and energy they need to recreate the divide and send those blacks and Hispanics and all these other minorities and all the other people who grew up or live in a metropolitan area back over onto the Democrat plantation. We have to be smarter than that. I'm already seeing it. I'm getting calls and emails and text messages from black people saying, "What is this?" And they're getting emails and text messages from people who are clearly just spreading white supremacist material, and these are the controlled opposition. These people are the Democrats on the Democrats in the deep state and the administrative state. These people have paid for this far right, quote unquote, contingent of content creators to send out all of this fear-mongering racial propaganda to a black America and minority America that just gave a mandate and referendum on the Democrats in favor of Donald Trump. That's what's going on. It's happening already. It started the day after the election. I'm trying to tell people how the deep state is going to play. They like the down position. It's easy to play revolutionary when you're in the down position, when you don't have the levers of power. When you have the levers of power, very difficult to say you're oppressed, AOC. When you get invited to the Met Gala and you wear a $100,000 dress, even if it does have some anti-establishment, rhetoric, written on it, doesn't matter. You're at the Met Gala. It's the most exclusive party in human civilization. You're at the Met Gala with a $100,000 couture dress on. Very hard to say you're a revolutionary when you have that level of elite access and lifestyle. Strip it away. Say we're the oppressed ones. They have all the power. There's the game. And right here in Minnesota, let me tell you who's going to thread the needle for them. It's going to be the neocons. All across the country right now, the neocons had to eat crow. They bit their lip. They bit down they bit their tongue. They hung their hat. They hung their nose. They voted for Donald Trump. They didn't feel they had to vote for me. They didn't care about the Senate. They don't care about Amy Klobuchar. Part of them felt they had to vote for Donald Trump, but they don't really like him. They don't support him. Or they'll say they support him because it's advantageous, because they get some weird sort of confection by doing it, on social media, Facebook or X. They get to feel like they're a part of the thing. Okay, cool. But they don't believe in the ideas, like fundamentally, spiritually, at a spiritual level. And maybe it's because we just haven't ministered to them enough. Maybe we need to. But the point I'm saying is this. The neocons, the real issue that we're having. The driving force for technological advancement is military. The driving force for the technological futurism that dominates and pulls the entirety of human civilization is greatly driven by our military interests. The military interest, the national security, the military will be the scapegoat and justification to usher us into the fourth industrial revolution, where automation and AI and robotics and genetic engineering and all these other scary dystopian things will become a norm. Surveillance, drones. Do you think it's strange? Not a single mainstream media outlet was willing to challenge me on any of the issues. None of them. It was all character attacks. They don't want to talk about the fourth industrial revolution. I challenge you to go and find one mainstream media article that covered me or this race that I had with Amy Klobuchar and even mention the fourth industrial revolution. And that tells you everything. The issue they don't want to mention is exactly what you should pay attention to. Like Carl Jung said, the thing that you need the most is usually hidden in the place you least want to go. The place we least want to go as the American people and as free people all across this planet, the place we least want to go is to wrestle with how dangerous convenience has become to our overall freedom and rights. We don't want to have to go there. And candidates like myself who sort of force us to go there, we're hesitant about, we're apprehensive about, we sort of want to reject that. You can accept it or not. You can reject it all you want. It's still coming. It's still coming at you full speed. The dangers of technology, the dangers of the fourth industrial revolution, the dangers of artificial intelligence and robotics and automation and surveillance, and it's hurling at you full speed. And it is not stopping for Donald Trump whatsoever. It's going to try and co-opt Donald Trump. It's going to try and pacify Donald Trump. It's going to try and wait Donald Trump out. But it's not stopping. And the reason it's not stopping is because we gave a mandate as the people in the electorate for Donald Trump. But the mandate underneath, the entire political ethos is much, much more, much deeper spiritually. Spiritually, we want convenience. That's the underlying mandate of the free market. We want the convenience. We'll take the convenience. And whatever degradation and moral and ethical shortcomings are a result with that, we'll take that too. Now you find me a place where Amy Klobuchar or any other candidate across this country can sit down with you for an hour and 45 minutes and explain what's happening in our culture, in our society, in our country the way that I just did, and I'll vote for them. But if not, get ready 2026, Minnesota. Get ready for 2026, Minnesota, because we're coming. We're not stopping. We know what's happening now. We know what happens now. What happens is these candidates they get pushed into a sort of a box so that the entire establishment can get a good grasp, can sort of pin down. Okay, here's the group. Here's who we want to support. Here's who we don't want to support. This guy's a little too populist. This guy's a little too nationalist. We're going to go with the more centrist person who's more electable, and that's who we're going to put our money behind, and so on and so forth. They think that they got the jump. They create the industry and the momentum and the timing of things in a way where they can prune the party of America First candidates. And that's why right now in the Senate, Donald Trump's having the problem that he's going to have. And it's not just in the Senate, it's in the House. Never forget, we had a crisis of America First and MAGA in the House and in the Senate before Donald Trump won the election. Anybody who's MAGA is going to tell you that. Anybody who's honest is going to tell you that. We had a dire crisis of America First, America First people in the House and the Senate before he won. And when I say a crisis, I mean there were few and far between in both bodies. Another reason they couldn't let Kerry Lake and myself and Brown and some other people across the country get into the Senate. That's another reason. And if you go back and you look at them, it's funny. You go back and you look at the mainstream, and I know part of it too is we still believe the mainstream media. Some of you still watch Fox News. Some of you still watch Fox News. Some of you still watch MSNBC. Some of you still read the New York Times. Some of you still read the Washington Post. Some of you still believe in the machine. And that's what we continue to fight against. People who believe in the machine. This is a rage against the machine, and rightfully so. Because the machine has lied. The machine is actually the whole problem. The machine is what's wrong with our country. We have to come to grips with that. Donald Trump is just an appetizer. And I say that with all due respect. Now, he's an appetizer, and he's going to bring an entree to this deep state and this establishment, and that's why they went out of their way to try and get rid of him, to try and take him out. But the rest of it's up to you. He can only go so far as the will of the people desires. That's the profound thing I'm trying to get across tonight. Donald Trump in this next 4 years, his term, his presidency, his administration can only go so far as the will of the people desires. And we're going to try and evolve that will here. That's what I'm here to do. As a voice in the movement, that's what I'm here to do. That's what I'm here for. I'm going to try and help evolve your will, the political will of the people. And I'm going to start right here in Minnesota, and we're going to go county to county, and we're going to minister to these people. And if they were out there and they were farmers and they believe Amy Klobuchar is anything more than a globalist puppet, we're going to minister to them. If they're in the cities and they still believe in the Democrat agenda, the Democrat plantation, and the Democrat propaganda, we're going to minister to them. But we're going to minister to them. And running a political campaign allows us to go and minister to these people. Because somewhere in here, between the church and the institutions, the party, somewhere in here, we've missed out on the education. If we hadn't, we wouldn't be having this problem. Or let's say this, if we had, there would be signs that we had, and there aren't. There aren't signs that we have an organization on a county-by-county basis in greater Minnesota, and there is not a single shred of sign that we have any sort of Republican representation in these dense populated metropolitan areas. Not a shred. And what Scott Presler did there in Pennsylvania was unbelievable. And we need to replicate now all across the country. But trust and believe, there are going to be some Scott Preslers from the other side. There are going to be some counter Scott Preslers. There are going to be some dark Scott Preslers that go out from the other side with the propaganda and try and replicate the exact same strategy. All that's going to happen now. So we're getting ready. We're geared up. We're not going to miss a beat. The podcast is going to be running 3 times a week as usual with the Sunday call-in show. We're getting that wired up this week. It might even happen this Sunday. We might test it out. You can call in, and I want everybody to call in. If you like me, if you hate me, if you love me, if you're indifferent, if you got a question, I want you to call into the Sunday call-in show, and we're going to put out more information about that so we can have more callers. But we are going full gear, nonstop. There is no off time. There's no break. There's no lag time. It's happening right now. 2026 has just begun. And they say that I'm not the lead nominee. I gained 8 points. This is what's wild to me. I mean, they think the American people are so stupid. More specifically here in Minnesota, they think the Republican voters are so stupid. Let's say the Republican Party members, officers, delegates, they think they're so stupid that the Star Tribune can release an op-ed from a Ukraine funding neocon campaign consultant that says the party needs to go away from me, and that nobody out there will recognize that a communist newspaper just told you the exact person that you should be supporting in 26. Whoever the Star Tribune thinks isn't the person is exactly who you should be supporting on that basis alone. Like whoever the New York Times endorses, I'm going with the other person. Because I understand what the New York Times represents, and I know what their agenda is. They're communists. They believe in the managed decline of the West. They believe in the destruction of freedoms and rights, basic freedoms and rights, and America as a country, as a nation. They mean to undermine it. 2026 has already begun. It starts right now. I gained 8 points. Amy Klobuchar won back in 2018 by 24 points. She beat me on paper. Now remember, in Hennepin County, the Minnesota Supreme Court had to tell Hennepin County to run the elections by the letter of the law. Had they not, there wouldn't have even been any Republican election judges down in Hennepin County, which is our state's biggest county and had the most votes. Obviously, where I lost the lion's share of the election was in Hennepin County, 700,000 votes to 200,000. I lost by 400, 500,000 votes right there in Hennepin County. And Ramsey, there was a little bit in both, but Hennepin County is the lion's share of the votes. And they weren't even going to seat Republican election judges. And watch for all the Republicans across the state of Minnesota who use Donald Trump to say that our elections are fair. That's all you need to watch for. Watch for the Republicans now that use Donald Trump. This is how tricky and manipulative they are. Watch for the Republicans all across the state and all across the country that use Donald Trump's victory to validate the integrity of the elections. Even when in Hennepin County, they didn't even want to seat Republican judges. I mean, they literally had to be told by the Supreme Court, you've got to seat those judges. Klobuchar won in 18 by 24 points. On paper, she beat me by 15 to 16 points. That's an 8-point gain. That's an 8-point swing. And what I said at the beginning that I wanted to get to that I don't think people understand is this. In a two-party dichotomy, here in America, it's a swing vote. So, if somebody's down by 8 points, percentage points, it's a 4% swing, which usually it will be because people are going to vote Democrat or Republican. Very rarely are people going to say, I'm not voting Democrat, so I'm not voting at all, which is what makes Kamala Harris's vote total so suspicious. Because you can't get me to believe that people just didn't vote for her. At least 10 million people didn't vote for her. I'm not buying that. But regardless, it's a swing vote. So I was able to swing 8 points, 8 percentage points in one election cycle with zero help and 1/18 of the money. We ended up raising $1.1 million when it was all said and done. And we have an incredible grassroots fundraising operation that we're involved with now, and we're very excited about becoming a true and genuine America First war chest of grassroots small dollar donations. And we will trust and believe we will help campaigns all across this country combat this uniparty and these neocons. I promise you that. We had 1/18 of the money. We had probably 1/3 of the name recognition. In fact, most of the name recognition came by way of all of the negative press that I got. And so with some of the negative press, that's going to, some people are going to see the negative press and they think to themselves, well, the Star Tribune is a communist newspaper. So if they're saying they don't like the guy, I probably should look into what he's saying. They find out what I'm saying. They come across a 2-hour podcast like this and they go, man, that's my guy. Not only do I like him, I love him. This guy should run for a bigger office one day. I like this guy. This guy tells it like it is. But you're going to have some people who look at the headlines and trust the headlines, and then their vote is forever lost. Or it's lost until we can go actually get in front of them and minister to them. Otherwise, we're always going to be fighting this battle of being at the whims of the mainstream media, and we can't do that. We can't rely on that. We can't settle for that. And so you're going to have to take a rent. I'm saying this for Kerry Lake and everybody else all across the country. Don't let anybody tell you. Don't let anybody tell you, oh, you lost, you need to go away. What if Donald Trump had gone away in 2020? What if people had said, you know what, Donald Trump, you lost by 6 million, 7 million votes in a landslide. You need to go away. This was the American people saying Donald Trump, is not the way. What if that had happened? What if he had let them, the narrative, the media, the people even convince him that he shouldn't keep fighting? What if Abraham Lincoln had let people convince him that he shouldn't keep running? He lost 8 elections over the course of his political career. And things weren't nearly as entrenched with corruption as they are now, at least not by my estimation, looking back on history. Things were much more straight up and down when Abraham Lincoln was running for Congress. Now, America First and populist candidates all across the country are going to have to take a couple runs at this establishment. And in each part of the country, you're going to have to take a few runs at these people. Because it gives you the platform, it gives you the power in some sense to go exactly where you need to go to talk to the people you need to talk to. This has been another episode of Please Call Me Crazy. Brought to you by Free People Radio, powered by our favorite sponsor, TireGet.com. That's TireGet.com. You have to buy tires from somebody, you might as well buy them from us and help fund the movement, help support the movement. We believe in the freedom of movement, and that's exactly what the establishment wants to take from you now. I'm your host, Royce White, here in the belly of the beast, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and this is episode 223, I believe. The day is Tuesday, November 12th, year of our Lord, 2024. God bless Donald J. Trump, 47th President of the United States of America. He was victorious. Victory begets victory. I can't convey how happy I am that we've been given another chance and that Donald Trump is going to be that foothold we need to start climbing this wall to bring this country back to greatness and prominence. I'm going to be here every step of the way. We will not budge. We will not take a single back step. We appreciate your viewership and listenership today and in the future. The fight continues. As always, Godspeed.